This is the Batman before Christopher Nolan. Yes, the one with nipples.
Very nice.
In 1997, Batman and Robin came out and turned the biggest superhero on Earth into a neon fever dream. The film was colorful, stylish, inappropriately erotic, and painfully unfunny.
Tonight's forecast. A freeze is coming.
It's gone down as one of the worst blockbusters in movie history.
If there's anybody watching this that went into Batman and Robin with great anticipation, if I disappointed them in any way, then I really want to apologize, because it wasn't my intention. My intention was just to entertain them.
Warner Brothers suffered so much financial damage that they were terrified to even mention Batman for years. But once they finally listened to reboot pitches, what they heard terrified them even more.
Some days you just can't get rid of a bomb.
Picture Clint Eastwood as Bruce Wayne.
You're kidding me.
Now make him homeless. Put him on the streets of Tokyo. Call it Gotham anyway. Remove Alfred. Replace him with Big Al, a black mechanic who takes Bruce in after his parents get shot. The concept felt like Taxi Driver in a batsuit.
You talking to me? Well, then who the hell else are you talking to? Talking to me?
It came from the mind of the guy who made that 2-hour drug ad. But even Darren Aronofsky himself knew it would never work.
I don't think I was the right guy at the right time. It was rated R. It was definitely, I think, a whole world of superhero films had to first come out to scrape the bottom of that barrel before they would go to rated R films like some of the later ones.
Who knows?
Kids buy Batman toys. Studios love Batman toys. Studios don't like R-rated Batman movies about a half-insane street vigilante raised by a mechanic.
Nobody eats that shit.
Other names floated in. The Wachowskis even worked on their own take for a bit, then walked away to make the Matrix sequels. So Batman dropped right back into developmental hell, and he might have stayed there if not for Troy. Yes, that Troy. Brad Pitt in sandals. Legolas without a bow. Somehow, that movie ended up saving Batman.
Sometimes you have to serve in order to lead.
Back in 2002, Wolfgang Peterson had just made Air Force One and The Perfect Storm, so Warner Brothers handed him almost $200 million without even blinking. He was deep into prepping when he suddenly decided to jump ship to work on Batman vs. Superman. That left the studio holding an empty director's chair for Troy, and here comes Christopher Nolan. Fresh off Insomnia, he came fully approved by Al Pacino and Robin Williams. The Warner folks took a risk on the promising young director and trusted him with Troy. Nolan spent months prepping and was all set to shoot. But then, Peterson's superhero movie failed. He wanted to make a retired Batman clash with a divorced Superman in a dark, R-rated, blood-splashing gore fest, which is predominantly the reason this and previous reboots got canceled. Peterson didn't take no lightly. He demanded Troy back, effectively firing Nolan from his big break. So, how did Warner smooth things over with Nolan? They offered him the opportunity to reboot Batman. Because nothing has ever gone wrong with that idea, right?
Have no fear of it. I'll keep all my wits about me.
Luckily for Warner Brothers, Nolan didn't want either the nipples from the 90s or a bloodfest. He wanted to take another crack at what he had already proven he was good at, a psychological crime thriller. But there was one issue. Nolan wasn't a comic book guy.
I've always been a big fan of the character, but I am by no means any kind of comic book expert. I felt I needed a writer on the project who really knew the character inside out, really knew the comic world.
Warner hired David Goyer, the screenwriter who practically invented the dark comic book movie with The Crow and Blade.
You might like it.
I remember telling my mother when I was a kid that I was going to go to Hollywood one day and do a Batman film. And in a way, I'd been waiting my whole life for this call.
Along with production designer Nathan Crowley, they locked themselves inside Nolan's actual garage, hammering out the story and posting concept art to the walls.
It was in August in LA in the garage with the washing machines. So we had to take the day off when the cleaner came around because they'd leave the dryers on and get way too hot.
7 weeks later, in that same garage, they hosted a meeting with the studio Fat Cats to read the single physical copy of the script.
After we finished the script, no photocopies were made for the executives at Warner Brothers. They came to Chris's house and sat in that same garage. They brought in some couches and read the script there.
Why in the garage? I mean, if you've heard about how analog Nolan is, you haven't heard the half of it. The guy is borderline paranoid, refuses to use a smartphone, and doesn't even have a personal email. But the bosses tolerated it, and for good reason. Nolan solved the very problem the previous guys couldn't. The story was intense and mature, but it avoided any hint of an R rating. Nolan explained that he didn't want to shut out the 10-year-old kids. He wanted to make the kind of film he would have obsessed over at that age.
The origin story had never been addressed on film, or really even in the comics. That is to say, there isn't really a single definitive account of Bruce Wayne's journey to becoming Batman. You have these sort of fascinating gaps, like the idea that he leaves Gotham as a young man and travels the world for 7 years. But it's not really detailed as to what he's doing and who he meets in that period.
So the script works. Batman gets the green light, and Warner Brothers hands Nolan a cool $150 million. But immediately, the studio panics. They just gave a fortune to an indie director, and they wanted a guaranteed box office draw. Their brilliant idea for the lead? Ashton Kutcher.
Shut up, dude!
Seriously, Nolan is trying to build a gritty, psychological noir, and the executives want the guy from Punk'd in the Batsuit.
What? Because, why not? We can.
Nolan put his foot down. He convinced them that a comedy actor would kill the movie's tone on day one. The studio backed off, and one of the wildest casting searches in Hollywood history began. They looked at everyone from veteran David Duchovny to a young kid named Heath Ledger. Ledger and Nolan actually talked it out and agreed Bruce Wayne just wasn't the right fit for him. They shook hands and promised to find something else to work on down the road.
I'm a man of my word.
Nolan narrowed the list down to 6 guys. You had Goyer's personal favorite, Jake Gyllenhaal. You had Henry Cavill, Billy Crudup, and Joshua Jackson. And then you had 2 actors who completely blew the room away, Cillian Murphy and Christian Bale.
In the same way that people were telling me, hey, you can't go play Patrick Bateman, it's career suicide. Other people also said, you know, if you play Batman, that's it. You're never going to play anything else again. You will always be Batman.
Well, a guy who dresses up like a bat clearly has issues.
And I went, bring it on. Let's see if that happens. Because I just always felt like, look, if I don't have the skill to be able to rise above that, then I don't deserve to either.
Nolan couldn't just pick from a tape, so he threw them all into a massive screen test.
So I did a screen test in the whole suit and everything, and
we shot it on the Warners a lot, I think, and everyone, like, you could see I knew the other guys that were auditioning, and I knew that Christian Bale was the obvious choice.
When I first met Christian, he was extraordinarily thin, having lost an enormous amount of weight for The Machinist.
It was something that Chris was a little concerned about because they did have to screen test for Batman, and it was pretty close on the heels of finishing on The Machinist. So I was really stick thin, and I had to try and put on weight as quickly as possible so that he could convince the studio that I was somebody worth considering seriously.
I was just stuffing my face all day long and lifting heavy weights, and eventually went up to like 220 pounds. I could see the look on Chris's face, he looked at me and it was like, oh Christ, what has this guy done?
Anybody with that determination and dedication to his art, was clearly going to be the obvious choice to portray an obsessive.
It was a moment of panic where I realized, oh crap. I took Chris at his exact word about get as big as you can, but he didn't really think I was going to get that big. A number of the crew I'd worked with on previous movies, they looked at me and they were like, bloody hell, Chris, what are we doing here? Fatman or Batman? And so I realized, okay, that's not what he had meant. So I had to then try and lose a lot of weight.
That's why it's so important.
Bale absolutely destroyed the competition, but Cillian Murphy was so intensely captivating that Nolan handed him the role of the Scarecrow on the spot.
Would you like to see my mask?
Which was a monumental bullet dodged for all of us. Before Murphy walked in, the studio was dead set on giving the villain role to Marilyn Manson.
It's why I do what I do.
Nolan was casting the supporting roles at the same time, aiming only for A-listers.
I think the closest to what I saw for Batman that I had seen in another film was probably the Dick Donner Superman film from 1978. And one of the things that made that film so epic was the great casting.
Chris has so many feathers to his bow as a director, but I think his skill at casting is something that people don't quite talk enough about.
Yeah.
He's always been genius at casting his films.
We wanted to give Batman the epic treatment that the character deserves. And making an epic isn't just about building big sets, it's about building big characters, and it's about building a believable set of people that the audience will be interested in.
But remember that paranoia? He was terrified the script would leak, so he didn't even tell the actors what movie they were about to shoot. He sent out the text under the title, The Intimidation Game. Michael Caine read his copy and genuinely thought he was signing up for a gritty British gangster flick.
Anyway.
He only agreed to play Alfred because he was wowed by Nolan's talent, and the feeling was mutual, because since Batman, Sir Michael Caine has appeared in almost every one of Nolan's movies.
Very well.
When the studio pushed Lawrence Fishburne for the Lucius Fox role, David Goyer shut it down. He had written the part with one actor in mind, Morgan Freeman.
I think I have just the day.
Freeman was actually an avid Batman nerd who had been reading the comics since he was 9. Yet ironically, he had no idea who Lucius Fox was until he read Goyer's script.
That won't stop a man like you now, would it? I suppose not.
As for Rachel Dawes, she didn't even exist in the comic book mythology and was written specifically for Katie Holmes.
And when I found out that I was going to be a part of it, I was just so thrilled. It was like, oh yeah, I'm in Batman. Ah!
Nolan originally wanted his Memento star Guy Pearce to play Henri Ducard, but the room vetoed it. Pearce was simply too young to be a believable father figure.
What the fuck is wrong with you?
So they went to Gary Oldman. Oldman had a resume full of iconic psychopaths.
And that was about the time when I sort of was thinking, I've had enough of this, right? And I think it was Doug, my manager, said or suggested to Chris, what about Jim Gordon? And to his credit, Chris, oh, that's interesting. And we met, and that's how it sort of, came about.
The really cool thing about Gary Oldman's performance in Batman Begins is that if you look at Frank Miller's Batman Year One and the depiction of Gordon in that comic, that's exactly what Gary did.
That left the Ducard slot wide open, which allowed Liam Neeson to step in.
I was shooting a Ridley Scott film, Kingdom of Heaven, in Spain at the time. And Chris came out to see me. I'd never met him before. Very, very quiet and tense man. Talked about this part. I wasn't sure. I mean, Batman. It's like, yeah, here we go, yeah.
And I wasn't exactly a big Batman fan. Haven't seen the previous films, but this material was, I thought, just exceptional. Convincingly tells the story of how a character, Bruce Wayne, would end up dressing up in a weird, funky costume to fight crime.
Crime cannot be tolerated. Criminals thrive on the indulgence of society's understanding.
What's great about Liam is Liam ultimately plays one of the villains. And he's never played a villain before. And he always plays these sort of fatherly, avuncular, mentor-like characters, which he does need to play in this film. But when he turns, he really turns.
If someone stands in the way of true justice, you simply walk up behind them and stab them in the heart.
Throw in a few quick cameos from Nolan's uncle and his old indie film buddies, and the roster was officially locked. The day before cameras rolled, Nolan sat his entire crew down and made them watch Blade Runner. When the credits rolled, he told them that was precisely how their Gotham needed to look. He even hired Rutger Hauer to cement the vibe.
What I do in casting the smaller roles is you look to who are the great actors of the past who inspired you. It's a great honor to work with people like that.
But how do you achieve so much realism in a comic book city? First off, film Gotham on the streets of London, New York, and mostly Chicago.
We were determined not to have this film feel like it had been filmed on a lot. We wanted there to be locations that would expand it, that would make the playing field and the canvas feel larger.
That gave the fictional city a feel of familiarity and truth. To achieve this effect with the Batcave, the crew needed to go even further. In the 90s, the cave was just a mix of a couple of decorations and enormous painted backdrops. But for the reboot, they spent 10 months inside the world's biggest aircraft hangar, building it for real.
In imagining the Batcave, we set out to look at the origin myth as it's been portrayed in the comic book, and we were very drawn to the notion of existing caverns underneath Wayne Manor rather than something that's constructed.
I can see everything all right from down here, sir. Thank you very much.
The Batcave starts with the rigging, then we go into wood, and then we cast these sheets, thousands of sheets. These are cast off existing rocks. And we're saying this was an underground lake that's drained out. So we're actually building a river that runs through here. And slowly but surely, we end up with a Batcave.
Charming.
But back to the streets. As you might assume, shooting practically comes with a cost. Nolan designed the new Batmobile, the Tumbler, as a mix between a Hummer and a Lamborghini.
What's that? Well, the Tumbler? Oh, you wouldn't be interested in that.
Chris Nolan wanted the Batmobile to be a real car, not just a car that looked pretty but didn't actually function. You know, his gem was, look, I want this to be a mean machine. I want it to perform. I want it to go through things, and that was, you know, how we went into developing this whole car.
It's 9'4" at its widest. Lengthwise, it's 15 feet, and height-wise, it's about 5 foot, I think. Weighs 2.5 tons. There's nearly half a ton of rear axle and wheels and tires. So there's a big chunk of the weight sitting there.
You get to play Batman, but unless you're the stuntman who's driving that car, you don't get to have the coolest job. I told Chris and I said, does this mean I'm going to be able to keep a Batmobile? And he said, you're crazy. Of course you're not going to be able to keep a Batmobile. Fair enough.
It looked terrifying, but the real nightmare was driving it through Chicago. It caused massive traffic jams because the stunt drivers had to crawl at a snail's pace just to avoid crushing civilian cars. It still caused an accident anyway, when a drunk driver smashed into it because he genuinely thought the Batmobile was an invading alien spacecraft.
At least tell me what it looks like. Never mind.
As a quick side note, Bruce Wayne's day-to-day car in the movie is a Lamborghini Murciélago. Murciélago is Spanish for bat.
Nice car. You should see my other one.
When actual filming began in March 2004, Nolan broke all the standard blockbuster rules. On a $150 million film budget, studios always use a second unit to shoot the stunts and background action, while the director focuses on the main actors. Nolan completely refused. He wanted to personally control every single frame, trusting only his cinematographer, Wally Pfister. He also stripped CGI down to the absolute bare minimum.
And I said, I saw it. I said, there was a marvelous CGI image of Batman on the top of a skyscraper. And the helicopter, I said, goes right round the whole of Chicago. I said, that's the best CGI I've ever seen. And she said, that was the stunt double. He was strapped to the top of the skyscraper. And that was a real man. And that's what this movie is about. When you see it, it's real.
Unless you're looking at the immense wave of sonar-summoned bats.
We knew we were going to have to do digital bat shots. We did an early on test trying to use real bats to see how they would play. But they tend to, not be very cooperative.
This obsession with reality even bled into the action scenes, which caused some hilarious logistical problems. Liam Neeson is huge. During the ninja training sequences, they had to stand the extras on boxes so Neeson wouldn't look like a giant.
You cannot leave any sign.
I haven't.
By the end of the shoot, Nolan just told him to slouch. But the real genius of the action was the camera work. Nolan shot the fights from the perspective of the bad guys. He wanted the audience to feel the sheer terror of being hunted by a monster in the dark.
Where are you?
There's been a lot of very, well, I think excessive use of, wire work and martial arts and everything, to the point where the violence loses its threat because it's become a bit dance-like, and we've become sort of comfortable watching it in that way. I'd always looked to a representation of Batman that would be more from the criminal's point of view, so you would see less of him. You would see him as more frightening. There would be more suspense as to what he was doing and where he was, and that meant showing less of it. Cutting fight scenes very, very fast so that Batman is seen as being blindingly quick and aggressive and almost animal-like in the way he takes on the criminals.
What the hell are you?
I'm Batman. To build this gritty world, Nolan needed the right sound. He turned to Hans Zimmer, Zimmer agreed, but he had one condition. He wanted to bring in James Newton Howard. They split the work to match the dual nature of Bruce Wayne and stopped at Lamborghinis. Look at the soundtrack. Every song is named after a bat species. If you read the first letters of tracks 4 through 9, they literally spell out Batman.
Nice.
So the film was shot, edited, and promoted for a record-breaking $100 million. Warner Brothers bet on Nolan's talent and were not disappointed.
And this year, Batman Begins is the Batman movie I've been waiting for and hoping for. It's one of the year's best films.
Your theatrics made an impression.
Sure, the movie only made $370 million, and by modern blockbuster standards, that isn't a colossal haul, considering the bloated production and marketing budget. But the studio didn't panic, and for good reason. The critical response was absolutely off the charts. It was the best reviewed Batman movie in history, and Wally Pfister even bagged an Oscar nomination for his cinematography. The movie's secret weapon was its realism. It dug deep into the psychology of Bruce Wayne and actually made his motives believable. It was so grounded and gritty that it directly inspired the producers of James Bond to completely reboot 007 a year later. Hollywood was stunned. They couldn't believe a young director had the guts to make a huge summer blockbuster exactly the way he wanted to. Nolan essentially treated this $150 million studio tentpole like one of his old scrappy indie movies. He didn't chase studio approval or pander to focus groups. Back in his indie days, he had to be his own cheerleader because no one cared if he finished his movies or not. He brought that same stubborn drive to Batman. He built the film he wanted to see simply because he felt it needed to exist. As Nolan saw it, when you make something purely out of love, you just don't question it.
Never.